Welcome to the Alpha podcast. This is a second podcast. We've got a fair bit of stuff to go through, I think. Wanted to kick off initially. Actually, there's a few cool things in the news, but if you don't mind, Chris, I wouldn't mind going through this with you because I think I skimmed through it. So this is that old article that you posted to me. Basically about building a company and building things that don't scale. And I thought that's like the opposite to what you hear all the time, right?
Yeah, that's why I liked it so much, because I was like,
Yeah.
this is not what you would usually have a mentor or anyone tell you what to do when starting a company. But this article, which appears to be written in July 2013, so it's like 10 years old nearly.
Crap, the internet was back then.
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty Paul Graham. Also, don't know who he is or what he's done since, but yeah, I thought this article was fantastic. And like I'm a big startup guy. I've been building startups for the last 6 odd years. It definitely feels like I've finally found my calling without being too cliche like. But it's a lot of fun. And some of these tips, I guess you could call them, or insights, are actually really good. I mean, it is a very long read. It'll probably take you about 20 or 30 minutes if you sit and hit it in one go. But
would we go through some of the points and talk about sort of like just the headings and talk about how you've kind of done that already and how we might implement some of that stuff with Alpha?
Yeah, sure. We could talk about that. So the first section, recruit, I think is talking about how the acquisition of users. And basically, I think the main point in probably like the fourth or fifth paragraph is basically saying, try to focus on acquiring 10% growth rate week on week. So if you've got 100 users, try to get 10 more by the week after. Then once you got that, try get 11, and then, so forth. And that compounding interest, it says after a year you'll have 14,000 users, but after 2 years you'll have 2 million. So it's actually scales quite well, even though acquiring users initially is obviously very hard, especially paid users. So that's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you've got 100 users, obviously scaling 10% might seem easier than when you've got 2 million and try to scale 200,000. But I think the last point it makes is, you'll actually get much better at it as you do it. So whilst you start at 0 essentially, and you go to 1 and you work your way from there, doing all of that manual acquisition over time, you get better and you gradually switch to less manual methods. But initially doing that in a manual fashion is good for a number of reasons, which are touched on in other parts as well.
Interesting.
What other bits? You've got the scroll, so I can't take.
Oh yeah, so fragile. Interesting there, or maybe not. Keep going.
Can't remember. I mean, the titles are a little bit somewhat misleading until you've actually read them. But this one, delight, is something that I have used and was the thing that got me to keep reading even further. Basically, sums it up pretty well in the first sentence. You should take extraordinary measures, not just to acquire users, but to also make them happy. And the example that they use in the next sentence is exactly what I did with CoinStop when we first started. So for as long as you could, Wufoo sent out each new user a handwritten thank you note. We literally did the exact same thing. When we started CoinStop and we were still packing our own orders from our living room, we used to write out handwritten notes just to say thank you for shopping with CoinStop, blah blah blah, whatever. I can't remember what was on those notes. We did that for probably the first maybe 500 or 1,000 of our customers for about half of probably 6 months. So this is a really good example of doing things that do not scale. So writing handwritten letters almost seems like one of the most stupidest things you can do, but the point here in this section is to go above and beyond the expectations of what your early users would expect.
Was it handwritten or typed?
I think initially handwritten and then moved to typed, but still signed. So there was, it was still a nice touch. These days doing something like that would be rather hard because the business has scaled much beyond that. But again, the point is early on when you right at the beginning of the startup cycle, doing things like this, going to those
nice. Yeah.
Yeah, doing something nice. It leaves a profound, when do you ever get a thank you letter when you buy something, e-commerce? Like never. Like I mean, sometimes some of these new modern companies where like they'll do like nice packaging and they'll have like an unboxing experience are leaning into some of these things. But again, then these are all examples of things that do not scale well. So as your company gets bigger and as your startup grows, it gets much harder to keep these things intact. And we obviously found that out. But the point here is, do it when you're small and it will pay off in the long run. And I think for the most part, it has for us with CoinStop as well, that exact example of sending out a handwritten thank you note. It could be something else as well. This is just the example used in here and the one that I have done myself as well. I think it's really cool.
That's cool. Yeah, we should brainstorm maybe not a handwritten letter, because one, my handwriting sucks. But two, I think, something that's sort of more updated, I suppose, than something back in 2013. Like what would people appreciate now, and people that are mining specifically, like something we could sort of take from that and do a 2022 version might be a cool thing.
Yeah, I mean, this paragraph's pretty good too. Like another reason founders don't focus enough on individual customers is that they worry it won't scale. When founders of larval startups worry about this, I point out that in their current state, they have nothing to lose. Maybe if they go out of their way to make existing users super happy, then one day they'll have too many users to do so for. I mean, that's a great problem to have, right? Like if you make your first 500 customers exceptionally happy and that spreads and now you've got 5,000, perhaps you can't go to that same length with that 5,000, but you now have 5,000 customers. So, I mean, these are all good things.
Yeah. And I suppose like the other thing, and then maybe he gets into it in this article, I'm not sure, but it's like scaling too quickly, like, certain mining companies that are out there that, don't support their customers and maybe can't because they don't have that ability anymore. I don't know if he gets into that in this article, but I think to me that kind of resonates, right? Like you have a certain amount that you can do, and if there's too many customers, like you just can't kind of do that stuff anymore. So
yeah. I mean, again, it's also a good problem to have. Scaling too fast is another set of problems that need other solutions to them. But that is the temptation, right? Like when you're going really well and you're going really quickly, you think that you've just lit the world on fire and nothing can stop you. Sometimes that's not a great thing, but yeah, I'm still quite new in terms of my startup experience. I've only been doing this for not even a decade. There are plenty of people, probably this guy Paul as well, who have been doing it for several decades and have a lot of these insights that they've stumbled across over time.
Yeah, like your experience is probably much different to mine. Like in the ed tech space, there's there's a lot of competition, but there's also a lot of people that kind of help each other. Where it's probably a bit more cutthroat outside of the ed tech space, I'm guessing. But it's interesting. Like I think the amount of, it's such a small niche market in the ed tech space. Like, so building a product and getting it out to people has its difficulties, but there's also like a good network of people that will support you. Whereas like CoinStop, I'm guessing you didn't get much support. Alpha, like we're kind of doing it on our own for the most part. It's different sort of experience. So yeah, it's interesting. But like for this article in particular, like what did you take away? It goes for a bit, doesn't it? What was the, because we're probably touching on a few points here, but what was the main takeaway that you got? Because I'll go through it on my own. Maybe we can chat about it next week as well.
I think I guess my takeaway is probably not to be scared to do things that perhaps don't seem efficient. especially at the early stage. I mean, I am big on efficiency. I don't like being inefficient, but in terms of like a startup, a lot of these things, like the title suggests, do things that don't scale. They necessarily aren't the most efficient way to be spending your time or your energy or your money, but they have prolonged and profound effects once that startup starts to roll and compound. So I read this and I go, it gave me even more ideas on perhaps some other ways to do things that don't scale. And I'm actually really interested to have this kind of front and center, this kind of thinking with Alpha when we start. I mean, it's the one thing I've done with CoinStop and my other startups is, big focus on the customer and their happiness, making sure everything goes after that, including company profits. Obviously, if at some point you can't let company profits completely burn you because you'll have no customers left and you won't have a business, but making sure that anytime you do fuck up or something is less than ideal for the customer, that you try to figure out a way to make sure that you've gone above and beyond, again, even if it's not scalable, even if it's an efficient use of time, but just leaving that lasting impression that, hey, these guys, even though they stuffed up or something didn't go right or whatever, they went above and beyond to at least make me feel like they cared.
100% transparency, right? So like, I think it's a huge thing that a lot, like, I mean, look at, we kind of touched on it before, like Celsius and what they've been doing, like with it's all obfuscated and cloak and dagger, and it's like there's people with like, serious money in there, maybe some people with their life savings, thinking, this is kind of the way forward, and they're burned. And it's just like, even if they like kind of came out and said, like, we try to do the right thing, but we're going to try and fix it, like, which they've kind of said on Twitter, but it comes across as fake, right? Because there's no transparency behind how their network works for the most part. Or like even what we're doing now, like having a podcast talking about, how you want to build the company and how you want to do it. There's none of that. So I think that's huge as well.
I mean, this is a perfect example of something that doesn't scale. Like we have 0 customers right now, so we can take the time, even though there's probably lots of other shit that we could be working on, but we could take the time on a Monday night to sit here and talk about the business. But if and when, and hopefully this does happen, we have a significant base level of customers, something like this might not be as easy for us to do because we've got plenty of other fires we've got to put out. But in classic fashion of this article, we're doing things that don't scale at the early stages of the startup cycle. I really enjoyed this article, and it got shared to me with one of my colleagues, and I've just shared it with anyone that I think might find some value in it.
Beautiful.
I think it's really cool. It's worth a read for sure. And the fact that it's 10 years old and it still kind of stands the test of time, I think it's a testament to the writer's, I guess, knowledge on the topic.
100%. Very, very cool. I'll go through it properly in my own time as well. But it's definitely captivating. I like that. I like reading old stuff as well. It's cool. All right. Switching gears. So this is a post that you sent to me, I do believe.
This is a post that I've been trying to think of this, or I have been thinking about this for, I don't know, the better part of the last month or two. And I've not been able to put it together in words of my own. It's just all in my head, and I talk to a few people and bits come out, and I'm still refining it. But this guy kind of hit the nail on the head with this 10-part post on Twitter. Basically, the two, it's summed up well in the second tweet. Solar and wind have two big problems. They produce power when most people don't need it, and they produce power where people don't need it. And that is the reality of especially here in Australia with the big push on renewable energy and we're seeing a massive energy crunch right now, an electrical crunch in Australia, where we're being told on the East Coast at nighttime to maybe consider turning the lights off or not using the heater, or just coming into, I don't know if you've heard this. I mean, it's been all over the news. But we're coming into winter, especially where I live here, although I have an open fireplace, so I don't necessarily rely on gas as much as say someone else in the city.
Yeah.
But it's getting cold, and you've got kids and you're trying to heat a big house, and we're being told by our government to consider not doing that because the grid's under massive loads at the moment, because obviously everyone wants to use their heaters and their electricity, but we've got big infrastructure problems with a lot of our gas plants, a lot of our coal plants, and now we're trying to push heavily into renewables. And as the second tweet in this tweet storm says, they produce power when people most don't need it and where people don't need it. So, solar wind are perfect examples of that, and why they are going to be, it's going to be a really big struggle to have them act as the base load. Right now, it's nighttime here, sun's not shining, solar's useless. If it's not windy, I mean, it can be windy at night, but again, the wind is temperamental. It's producing power when I don't need it. Perhaps it's windy in the day when the load on the network is not so high. And also the other part of that is these farms, these solar farms and these wind farms are often in the middle of nowhere. The farms that we have access to with Alpha, the vast majority of them are in, I guess you could call it rural South Australia, a few hours away from the city. And so the generation of this energy happens in places where the population is quite low, and it's being generated for nobody, so to speak. And because we can't transport power in a truck or in the post, or it's really, really difficult to transport and also to store power, a lot of power just ends up getting wasted. So that's kind of the narrative that this Daniel guy is going on. The first problem means a lot of wasted energy, still need a gas turbine on standby for permanently when the sun isn't shining. And that's that coal or gas base load that we often hear about, the politicians talk about in the media, is we need that base load. And for once, they are kind of right. The second problem means the power can't always get on the grid and gets wasted. So, if it's really sunny and it's really windy and it's in the middle of the day and no one's really putting that much stress on the grid and we're not storing it and we can't transport it, it goes nowhere. So we've got this infrastructure sucking in all this great juice from natural resources, and it's got nowhere to go. No one's there to use it. So there's a real big mismatch. And I guess that's what this whole thing is about. And so then he goes on to talk about how potentially, I guess, Bitcoin could be the solution to this. Add Bitcoin mining into the mix as well as a battery, and the renewable operator gets 20% more revenue because they can choose whether to use the excess power to charge a battery or do Bitcoin mining, and whether to use a full battery to sell power to the grid or mine Bitcoin. So, and this is the big bit that's been running through my head over the last couple of weeks, is after listening to a few podcasts and reading a few articles, I started thinking about this concept of a balanced load. And it's quite new from what I can understand. Industry just isn't really flexible. It doesn't have the ability to be balanced. If manufacturing needs to manufacture, then it's on. It's on or off. It can't just flick on and off at the drop of a dime, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. When the sun's shining, it's great. Clouds roll over and it ruins everything. Or the wind's blowing and 10 minutes later it's dead still. And these manufacturing plants still need energy. They still require a load. They can't simply go, okay, guys, everyone go home for 10 minutes. The sun stopped shining. Oh, wait, guys, everyone come back. The clouds have disappeared and we can turn back on. Industry just doesn't have that ability, but Bitcoin mining does. And that's where it gets really interesting. So, and that tweet there is, I guess, talking about, these power generators, whether they're solar, wind, or whatever, in the middle of nowhere, can drop a Bitcoin mining container, plug it in behind the meter, and if they've got excess energy and there's not a big requirement, or there's not a big, there aren't too many people, asking for that power, and it would generally be just wasted, you can point that towards mining Bitcoin, which is also generating revenue as well because of obviously the Bitcoin mining rewards. So Bitcoin actually stabilizes the grid, makes it more efficient, and offers a balanced load, which if we want to move towards these renewable energy targets that we always hear get talked about, and I don't want to get into a discussion about whether they're all BS or not, but the reality is here in Australia, the last election was basically predicated on the fact that Labor went into the more renewable, clean energy angle compared to Liberal, which are very coal and gas and all that sort of stuff. So they basically lost the election on the fact that they didn't want to make any sort of commitments on that, amongst other reasons, of course, as well. But if we really want to go down that direction, then, I mean, literally 2 months after, not even 2 months after they were elected, we're now being told to turn off our bloody heaters at night because the grid can't keep up. So the sun can't shine at night, and you can only put up so many wind farms in so many random locations before, like there's just like there's a point where it just doesn't scale as much. And I think it might get talked about in this tweet thread down the bottom as well. Yeah, here's a fun fact. Do you think wind totally is growing exponentially? Nope. The growth rate for solar was 54% per annum in 2012, only 24% now. Reason, every extra 10% of intermittent renewable energy is a bigger and bigger headache for the grid operators to manage. Yeah. So it's just, all of this is just a bit of a cycle or a bit of a shitstorm to say, like, renewable energies, like just sticking up more solar panels and more wind farms, it's not as simple as that.
No,
it doesn't. It's not like a click your fingers and magically now we just got heaps of more infrastructure and everyone's happy. The reality is we're going to need, of course, we're going to need more infrastructure built, but at the same time, we're going to need to find ways to create balanced loads. And the only one that I'm aware of that has any value is, in my opinion, is Bitcoin mining. Perhaps other industries will start to figure out ways, and I hope they do, figure out ways to become more balanced. But, a hospital needs to run all the time. So they can't just say, oh, sorry, we would turn off your heart machine for 10 minutes because the wind stopped. I mean, obviously that's not going to happen. But there are other elements of society that perhaps could, or if maybe we haven't created them yet and we need to figure out ways. But, the classic meme, Bitcoin fixes this. This is a great example of how Bitcoin fixes a lot of the inefficiencies in the renewable energy market. And so I've been thinking about this a lot, and I was really happy to find this tweet storm because it really summed up a lot of the things and put it into a nice package. So I recommend people reading through all 10 of them if they're interested in the idea of that. But that's kind of my assessment of the situation. And it got me thinking, like, okay, well, how can we potentially integrate some of these things into Alpha? Because Alpha is a Bitcoin mining company and we are hosted on solar farm sites, and a portion of our electricity comes from those solar farms that are on site. Obviously, when the sun's not shining, we can't take energy from that solar farm generator, and we rely on the grid. But, is there ways that we can perhaps with our business offer some sort of balanced load type service or product? I haven't quite put a lot of thought into it, but because there's so much to think about, and this is why startups get me so excited, because like 1 million problems, 5 solutions, and you got to kind of claw your way back the other direction. And you end up finding more and more things you want to solve before you've even solved, the ones that you were thinking about the week before. But it's exciting and I love it, and it's so much fun. But is there a way that we could potentially offer people perhaps cheaper electricity? Because when it comes from solar, it's generally cheaper than when it comes from the grid, at least here in Australia. I know other parts of the world have much better energy rates than what we do here in Australia, but the reality is we're in Australia and that's what it's like. But maybe there's a way, I'm fairly new and fairly green to the Bitcoin mining industry. Obviously I've known about it for nearly 10 years, and I wanted to become a Bitcoin miner in 2011, but didn't have the audacity to pull the trigger and buy some hardware. So that's on me. But, is there a way that we could maybe, because I know, generally speaking, Bitcoin miners want to be mining all the time. I want as much Bitcoin as I can get. I don't want to be missing out on blocks while it's nighttime or the wind's not blowing. But, maybe there is a case to be made somehow and a package to be formed where you offer a type of service like that, where when the grid's not under severe load, we take up that excess wasted energy. I know there are people here in Australia also looking at doing stuff like this, looking at flared gas and all sorts of stuff, which would have been wasted otherwise, but now can be pointed towards Bitcoin mining, and it's generally pretty cheap because it would have been nothing. So if someone's come along and pay me 5 cents per kilowatt, then that's 5 cents more than what I would have had if it was just being wasted. So I'm really bullish on Bitcoin mining. Actually, ironically, everyone loves to talk about how Bitcoin mining is bad for the environment. I actually think it's going to help the environment.
100%. That's what I wanted to ask you. So we obviously are going on the offensive now, right? Like, so for the last 10 plus years, we've been on the defensive, saying, fending off, it's for criminals, it's for this, it's for that, it's no good, like it's no store of value.
Uses the electricity of Switzerland and all sorts of shit.
You're a criminal if you want to use it. Right. We have to keep defending. This is the one point we can actually go on the offensive, and talking to people in the space of, there's like a lot of people that are very passionate about green energy and they're kind of future focused and thinking about, like, how do we create a society that's more efficient, and I resonate with that. It's great, but they all tend to have the idea in their head that Bitcoin mining is a bad thing. It's bad for the environment. It's bad because you have these computers whirring away, as they say, like fax machines sitting in the background. Have you had any success actually going on the offensive with this sort of rhetoric yet? Because I've tried and I've failed. So like, none of them will have a bar of it.
Yeah, I mean, are you talking to absolute no coiners and normies, or are you talking to like perhaps some people who have even if it's a really basic understanding?
No coiners so far. Yeah,
I think those are tough conversations to have for sure. Yeah. I mean, I've been having a few random conversations with my girlfriend's family about some of these concepts without really dropping the bomb of Bitcoin on them. More so talking about like, how's money created and what's going on with the energy grid and why are we in these, like having really just general conversations. I mean, I think they're perhaps more open-minded as well than the average person. I wouldn't say exceptionally open-minded, but maybe slightly more. They're willing to at least listen and have these conversations. So I'm really like watering it down and not coming in hard Bitcoin, cryptography, all that sort of
everything.
Stuff. Yeah. I don't want to drop an absolute, storm on them. So I'm just I'm posing questions, and this is generally the way that I also learn myself. So again, everyone learns differently, but I pose questions I go, because it's kind of hard. You have to be almost like, completely blind to not see what's going on with both energy and money and all the things that are wrong with the economy and the world at the moment. Everyone can kind of see it, but no one really wants to ask the questions. And so I'm kind of posing the questions. Like, look, how you being told on the mainstream media to turn off your electricity at night. Do you know why this is the case? And then starting there and kind of going, I mean, some of these, coal power plants are 40 years old and they're kind of decrepit by that point. And the renewable energy, and just kind of asking different questions and posing different situations to get them to see like, oh, I mean, that kind of does make sense. And slowly warming them up to that. It's a lot harder with no coiners, of course. With some people who do have even a basic understanding of Bitcoin and I guess cryptocurrency, if you want to call it. I think like you can be a little bit more heavy-handed in some of the things you say. Like, one thing that I've been seeing float, I mean, this always floats around. It's good it's good combat to the FUD of Bitcoin uses too much energy, it uses the energy of Switzerland or blah, blah, whatever they say. There's been some I think Bitcoin Magazine might have tweeted it, and perhaps there was a few other people as well that was doing the rounds, but it was like comparing, I think it was specifically perhaps in the US only. I'm not sure if they were using the whole global hash rate or just the US hash rate. But basically it was doing a comparison of, energy consumption in different sectors and different appliances and stuff like that. And you probably would have seen it yourself, but Bitcoin mining uses less energy consumption than tumble dryers, dryers for your clothes. And so, everyone loves to say it uses so much energy, it's bad for the environment. The reality of it is tumble dryers use more. I don't own a tumble dryer. I've never really owned one myself. I'm a old school guy. I just hang my clothes up and let the sun dry it.
Man, that's so funny because we just bought a washer and dryer in one, and it does, and it's like a smart device, so you can like do it from your phone, like wherever you are, and it like notifies you like when the next cycle's coming up and rah. But it doesn't use like the traditional tech that a dryer uses, like a tumble dryer uses. It's got like a steam mechanism, so you don't get fluff and stuff everywhere. It's amazing. But yeah, we spent probably way too much on a machine that we probably don't need. But it's a good point, right? Like, I mean, like,
well, that's the point I try to make to people, right? I'm like, all right, well, if tumble dryers use slightly more, I mean, it's close, but it's slightly more, and it's not much. It's like, you look at I don't know the numbers, they probably don't mean anything without the context, but it's like,
and how do you authenticate it, right? Like, how do you know?
Well, that's probably, I mean, you can authenticate Bitcoin, but you can't really authenticate tumble dryers. But we can make some reasonable estimates, and it might be slightly higher. I don't know what the variable tolerance would be there, but a couple percent either way, whatever. The real question is, okay, well, if we're going to use that as the true comparison and throw out this, it uses the energy of Switzerland or whatever nonsense that people say, is having tumble dryers a net positive for society and humanity? You could probably make a case that it is. Yeah. I mean, it's probably an advancement of people's quality of life, being able to not have to rely on the sun. If it's raining, cloudy, I mean, in Melbourne, especially during the winter, it's almost impossible to dry your clothes outside. So you've got clothes horse all around. I mean, when I lived in Melbourne, I had like multiple clothes horse all around the house, on top of the heaters, just trying to, it would take me 3 or 4 days to dry my clothes.
No.
And so, in that case, the tumble dryer probably would have been really, really good for me. So yeah, maybe I think you can make a case that they're probably a net positive. And then you have to ask the same question to Bitcoin mining. Like, do you think Bitcoin mining provides a net positive to society and to humanity? Obviously, being a Bitcoiner, I think so. Yes, I think substantially it's like nothing we've ever seen before when it comes to money. And so, using the comparison of tumble dryers, I would rather lose them than lose Bitcoin.
Money and network security, right? Like,
all the components, the decentralization, I mean, everything, all of the things that make Bitcoin so beautiful.
Yeah.
Packaged up in its energy consumption, is that a net benefit compared to, say, tumble dryers? If you had a gun pointed to your head and said, what would you, we've got to take one of these things away and you're never going to have them back, it's going to be tumble dryers or Bitcoin. I would say, let's keep Bitcoin. We'll figure out a way to get our clothes dry. It's not that big of a problem, but having a censorship resistant, all of the, again, amazing properties of Bitcoin, this has never come around before, ever. I mean, even if this thing fails ultimately, which I don't think it will, but let's hypothesize this thing fails and it turns out it's a worthwhile experiment, because we need something like this, whether it's not this exactly, we need something like this to separate money from state and to fix all of the problems that we've inherited because of fiat, essentially.
Exactly.
So I think it's worth it. I think even if it 10x'd in energy consumption from here, I would probably still say it's probably worth it. We might not be comparing it to tumble dryers anymore. We might be comparing it to tumble dryers and dishwashers or something like that. But again,
or gold.
Well, yeah, or gold. And there has been some interesting gold news recently as well. Not that I'm much of a gold bug, but we if you're interested in chatting about that particular thing, we can. But yeah, anyways, this point of the story is Bitcoin provides a balanced load. It actually accelerates and helps make renewable energy generation more efficient. And so whenever anyone says it's bad for the environment or it uses too much electricity, point them towards this tweet thread and try to understand some of the concepts here, because I think they're really important.
Hell yeah, hell yeah, very cool. There was a link as well that kind of went through some of the points on YouTube, which is cool. Yeah, I mean it's so important, but it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Like the disconnect that is still prevalent. So like even the gold example is like it dwarfs the amount of power used by BTC and the network, but the power of the legacy media just trumps that. Like you just have people that will look at that and that's all they can see. It's amazing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would consider at this point why we're using so much energy and resources on mining a rock that, for all intents and purposes, is mainly held in a bunch of central locations around the world, has some small industrial relevance through jewelry and some components. But at the end of the day, a lot of that has moved to other areas. Like many people now are more interested in silver and all different types of other jewelry. And same with like smartphone components. I think a lot of it has moved away from gold. So it really is just a store of value at this point. And to its credit, it does a reasonable job at storing value. Doesn't really appreciate value very well, but it stores it. So, you know, gold certainly has some elements that are useful. I mean, it's been used for thousands of years, but at this point, you know, I think it's an exceptional sunken hole of our resources and our energy consumption. I just don't really see it being. It just doesn't make sense to me anymore.
No,
Like,
neither. And you're not going to stumble across like new Bitcoin, right? You could go out into a field tomorrow and stumble across a whole bunch more gold.
and that's a good segue to the point that I was going to make earlier. And I don't know if you heard this, but I don't know how verified some of this stuff is, but apparently, so they estimate, and they can only estimate because this is, again, one of the problems that Bitcoin fixes compared to gold is we can't really verify anything. We just kind of have to take the miners' words for it. And we know they probably hold some of the supply or don't put some of the supply into circulation, into the official circulation. But anyway, that's another problem. They estimate roughly 210,000 tons of gold have been mined over the course of history. In, I think it was Uganda, 99% sure it's Uganda. They've just uncovered a big, I don't even know what you call it, a big repository of gold that they estimate to be over 300,000 tons. So more than double the circulating supply of gold since we started tracking it to this point. They might have just found 1.5 times more of unrefined gold. Yeah, this is the stuff. 320,000
I love
tons.
that it's bitcoin.com is the first hit for that.
So, I mean, does that, you know, if this turns out to be true, obviously that'll take some time and resources to actually mine and refine and all that sort of stuff. But that would, in theory, double the amount of circulating supply of gold. So, you know, that would mean we'd have to see more demand if we wanted to keep the same price of gold. Otherwise, you know, basic supply and demand would suggest that perhaps the price of gold should halve. I mean, it's obviously not that black and white, but for argument's sake, yeah, pretty wild stuff. I haven't looked too much deep in this because I don't really care about some shining rock, but I did see the headlines and I thought, yeah, that is one of the ultimate problems that Bitcoin solves comparative to gold, is the fact that no one's going to stumble across, like you said, no one's going to stumble across tomorrow and find 21 million more Bitcoin.
No, unless they can uncover it from the landfill.
The hard drives that people have thrown out over the years. I mean, that's real gold mining right there.
That's the real deal. Yeah, it's crazy. But like the point is, it's not going to be more, right? It's still
it's that same supply. Yeah.
Dude, that's amazing. That's incredible. So this one I found really interesting. So I don't know if you looked into the New York mining ban at all, or its authenticity, but it sounds pretty legit. Like they're basically saying within the state of New York, you can't mine BTC, which is
Yeah, I heard of
mind
this
blowing.
bill, but I don't know when it comes into effect, and I don't know like the specifics. But as far as I know, it was approved and it's going
Yeah,
ahead.
which is mind blowing, right? Like you would think the place. Well, it's interesting, right? So they obviously have Wall Street. They obviously have a lot of legacy finance advocates. So maybe
Yeah,
that sort of plays into it. Like that is how the original Bitcoin Center got shut down because it was on Wall Street, and the legacy finance dudes just use regulation to.
didn't New York also like come up with some of the first like licensing,
Yep.
like the bit license? So it's
Yep.
they seem super hot and cold. Like
Yeah.
I'm not American. I don't live in New York, so I don't really know the finer details. But yeah, it just seems like they kind of seem to be flip flopping between whether they're pro this or anti that, and they
Well, the
sort of
bit
can't.
the bit license I think was like a bit of a negative as well. So I think they were kind of using it as a means of regulation to sort of force
Right.
people out. And yeah, it was
So it wasn't a
I,
positive like, hey, we're welcoming everyone in. It's like a hey,
nah,
we're building this wall, try get past us.
exactly,
Yeah, well,
exactly.
that would be more in character with this type of decision as well to ban Bitcoin
Yeah,
mining. But this, I mean, I haven't read the article, and I mean, it's just a big opportunity for somewhere else. And like I know Texas has been all open arms about Bitcoin mining. So I mean, China did it; they banned Bitcoin mining, and everyone just said, "Oh, no worries,
fine.
see you later.
Yeah,
We'll go
yeah,
elsewhere."
yeah.
And that's how the free markets work. And um, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily. This is just the only people that lose here is New York. Like
New
that,
Yorkers. Yeah.
yeah, that's the real losers. I mean, and they brought it upon themselves. So I don't really have that much more to say on it, to be honest.
Well, no, I was thinking like ramifications, obviously for us for Alpha, if something similar were to happen here,
Right.
or in Adelaide, or which it could happen. You never know.
Good.
The
Our government
wrong,
has a rich history of being assholes.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's like what's I suppose, like you said, it's like the way China sort of banned it. It was like, okay, well, we're going to Texas. We're going elsewhere. With us being Australian focused, would that have ramifications for us? And is it worth us sort of planning for the future for that?
I mean, yeah, it's a totally valid point and something that certainly could eventuate. I bloody hope not.
Yeah.
Um, well, I think there's a couple of things to say. So one, it's better to try and stop that from ever happening than to try to figure out what the solution is after it does. So
Okay.
one, having discussion with policymakers whenever possible to make sure that they understand. I mean, some of the things that we are talking about before with the balanced loads, having these discussions with the regulators saying like, hey, don't shun us, don't read all the FUD about it being bad and people banning it for whatever reasons they ban it. Have a discussion with us, learn a bit about it, learn how we can actually assist some of your goals. So I'm actually one of the co-chairs on the Bitcoin mining committee for the Australian Bitcoin industry body. That was a bit of a mouthful, but basically the ABIB is there to have these discussions with, to bridge that gap between Bitcoiners and regulators. I mean, we all stand at different parts of that spectrum of how much regulation we want, but the reality is we all live in this country and we're still governed by it, sometimes unlawfully. But the ABIB is there to have those discussions. So for one of the things that happened in the there's another committee that focuses on politics. One of the things that they did leading up to the recent federal election was to email every single senator and MP and ask them some basic questions on where they stood in terms of Bitcoin. Do you understand it? Do you think it should be regulated? Do you think it's part of the future? I mean, all of this is on the Australian Bitcoin Industry Body website, and any of the responses are there if people want to have a look. But so this level of prevention to that type of thing happening, where they put an all out ban on Bitcoin mining, would be ideal. So part of my job, not that I'm paid for it, but part of my volunteer job, being part of the Bitcoin committee, is to have these conversations with these key figures, whether they're politicians, regulators in the energy grid, like all of these stakeholders, having conversations with them and trying to educate them about why banning Bitcoin mining would be a really bad net negative if they were to go down that route. But yeah, this is the Bitcoin industry body website. You can have a look at the manifesto, the members, the sponsors, and you'll see. Yeah, that's me. My name's actually not Charles, but it's funny. But yeah, somewhere on the website, I can't remember exactly where. But you can
Tiggs. Well, shout out to Tiggs. That's one of my friends. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, you need to join this as a sponsor.
I actually tweeted them. I said as soon as that popped up, I need to stop being lazy and actually do this. So I'll do that this week for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, you can see. I don't know if it's on the homepage or might be
activities maybe.
Yeah, that's like you can see there was a link there to see or there you can see the committees, the politics committee and the mining committee.
It was like pre-election; they had everything sort of front and center. Yeah,
but anyway, so point is, trying to have positive conversations with some of these people to stop something like that ever happening. If it did happen, and it would be interesting to see whether it would be a state or a federal ban. If it's a federal ban, then yeah, that's going to be really bad. That would be terrible if we had all of our infrastructure here and we had customer miners hosted in our infrastructure, and we got told that it was now illegal to mine Bitcoin. That would be really bad.
It would be really bad. It would be, and not just bad for us. It'd be bad, well, like we were talking about, for the whole of Australia, really. Like if not just for the monetary aspect, but for the infrastructure. So the fact that they're saying, turn off your heater, rah, 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 this is the solution. If they're going to ban it, we need to articulate that like ASAP, I think, to as many people as possible, because it's like, to me, like being Australian focused is awesome, and I think it's really important, for Alpha as a business. And I think without overextending ourselves, sort of going overseas, I think having it here and saying this is Australia first, we need to be the forefront. Let's sort of do it. Having things like this is really going to help that. So yeah, anything we do to get that going forward, I think, is the way to go.
Well, thankfully, the Australian regulators seem to be pretty pro crypto, pro blockchain. So given this is one of the times perhaps Bitcoin being connected to crypto and blockchain is perhaps a good thing, because we get bundled up with the fact that they're pro all of that. Even though they're not really looking at Bitcoin as a solution or anything like that, they don't look at it as a negative. They just throw it in there with the basket of all the other shit coins. And if they're pro all of them, then by nature they're pro Bitcoin. Even again, like I said, even though they're not overly enthusiastic about Bitcoin specifically, like we are, at least we get a little bit of cover in that sense, like
maybe, but it could go the other way, right? Like, so particularly
I mean, it could, especially if the FUD of Bitcoin mining being bad for the environment and all that sort of stuff really does take on, and then if Ethereum ever gets to 2.0, that's right. Like, people will start going, proof of stake's the future of this technology because it's so much cleaner and greener, and then we're going to have to fight all of that nonsense FUD again. So
well, actually, no. Backtracking on what I was saying though, so I have had those conversations with Ethereum maxis around mining specifically, and that being the solution, and they've got a wall up for that. Like, there's no way they're taking that on as a solution for anything to do with the environment, for anything green. In their mind, their investment in Ethereum is the solution to everything, and that's it. And it's very hard to break through that. So it's almost harder than a no coiner, I would say, which is frustrating as hell, because you would think something that's been built on proof of work for so long now, right? And has a lot of similar properties to BTC, you could say, even though it's just a database sitting on Amazon pretty much. But you would think there's some sort of way in for them to have an understanding of how this could be a solution, but no. It's
I could be wrong here, but I don't think Ethereum's ever really pulled on that string of, hey, we're proof of work and that's where the security comes from. Like, they've got so much other shit going on. Like, smart contracts and DeFi and all these other things that they're like the furthest thing from anyone involved in the Ethereum community that they care about would be the fact that there's energy going into the consensus mechanism. Like, I just don't think that like it is with Bitcoin, like that's like one of the fundamental core aspects of Bitcoin, and everything else is built around it kind of thing.
Yep.
In Ethereum,
it is the
just
regulation, right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, it literally is. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's no surprise that they want to move to proof of stake as well, right? Because to be honest, if it's not really something they lean into, then why are they even doing it? I mean,
Yeah.
I know why, because it's the best consensus mechanism that anyone's ever come up with, but it's not an important part of their network like it is with Bitcoin. Bitcoin, you know, that's the thing it's selling, is the fact that it can't be corrupted, it can't be changed, it's got the most secure network in the world and in human history. Like, these are all things that make Bitcoin good. But and I guess no other project can really compete on that front, just by the fact of they're not the first mover. And you know, if someone could try to create the same thing as Bitcoin now, and it just, who would put hash rate to it?
It couldn't happen. It couldn't happen.
No, it couldn't happen. No.
And the thing is, like, every other crypto is hackable. Bitcoin's unhackable. That's the thing, right? So it's and it's a big claim, but it's pretty much true. Like, I mean, if you were going to hack the Bitcoin network and hack the blockchain, you'd need so much energy that it wouldn't be worth it. All these other chains, they don't need that. So you could do 51% attacks quite easily if you wanted to, or, you know, what are the other mechanisms you want to do for that. So I think that's another key point as well. I wanted to, before we sort of finish up, there was something else I really wanted to touch base on before. And it's not so much about mining, because there's so much content. We have to make sure we keep up the podcast if we can.
Yeah, I mean, me traveling for the last month hasn't helped, but I'm back home now, so every Monday we'll be chatting.
See if we can do it. This one here, did you? And this, I think it kind of bleeds into everything, I suppose. So it's what we're building up for alpha and everything is going to support the antithesis of this. But China bank stopped health codes turning red, depositors say, right? So basically what happened, there's a Reuters article about it, there's a whole bunch of stuff about this in the news. In China, they've got these like QR codes. So it's kind of like the inverse of what we do, you know, checking in here. They basically have a QR code that turns green or red, scanned by whatever thing they're trying to do. So whether it's like go to the movies or you know, go to the shops or rah, rah, rah. It's a COVID test has to scan for them to be allowed to go into that sector, if you want to call it, to get on the train or bus or whatever it is. So this bank.
What's that? Sorry, what's that checking? Your health status.
Health status, yeah. So like your COVID status, your vaccine status, all the rest of it.
Right.
This bank decided, because there were so many people going to do like withdrawals from the bank, and there was like some protests associated with it as well, they managed to get
a bank run.
Yep. CCP just turned them all red. So they're all going up trying to get, so they're not even allowed near the bank to get it. I was like, wow, this is it, right? So here's the thing. So I've sent this to a bunch of people and just sort of get feedback on it and see like where their mindsets are at. Obviously, Bitcoiners and, you know, even people in the crypto space can see exactly what the solution is for this. Right? My no coiner friends read this and they go, "Oh, well, that's China. That can't happen here."
Yeah, I mean, I think I used to be naive enough to think like, yeah, that would never happen here. Like, our country is much more stable and not as crazy as that. But now, I mean, that, I was about to say it before, like that literally could happen here, and I would not be surprised.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Really amazing.
I mean, like to certain degrees, things like this are happening here, like where healthcare workers aren't allowed to do their job that they're in the profession of because they don't meet the requirements of whatever the government have set in terms of boosters and all that sort of stuff. They're literally teachers is probably another industry. Yeah, I mean, we're literally having like massive, we've had this for as long as I can remember, but it's just gotten worse because no one's bothered to fix the problem. But we're having massive problems with, we're getting a little bit off topic here, but we're getting massive problems with our healthcare system here in Australia, where there's no beds, there's no operating tables, there's a shortage of staff, all because of some of these decisions that have been made. Now, you know, I don't want to get into a conversation or about what should have happened with COVID and all that sort of stuff, but this, it's like, that's an example of basically the same thing that's happening here in China, except instead of being banks in this instance, it's people's work,
exactly,
on their livelihood.
Yeah.
So
Exactly
things like
right.
this can and likely will happen here in Australia. I mean, we have seen things where, I mean, this is just kind of ongoing, I think. Like, but you know, we can't go down to the bank right now and withdraw all our money. You know, there's a certain threshold that they impose on us before we need to seek permission, essentially, to withdraw large amounts of money. I don't know what that number is exactly. It probably depends on your account, your bank, but you know, a few grand to $10,000. When you get beyond that amount of money, you're not allowed to go down to the bank and just say, "Hey, give me my cash in my, you know, in my bank." They'll literally turn you away and say, "Please come back, give us a few days notice." Or in some instances, they probably won't even allow it. These are the early warning signs of something like that happening here.
Exactly right. That the inverse of what you're saying was this Reddit post. This guy trying to buy $10 million worth of Bitcoin, and kind of not able to do so. I was like, oh wow, that's amazing. So like the fact that he has that much cash sitting there, he can't transfer it all into BTC in one hit. So there's a whole bunch of solutions that people have to do that, and basically it's all incremental. But yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Like the on ramps, to bring it back full circle, the on ramps for that, sort of the barrier to entry to buying. So in my mind, like my solution to him would be start mining, put that money into miners and start mining for BTC instead of relying on exchanges for that, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's one solution for sure.
And no KYC that way as well. All right, so to finish up, the website. So we've got our site launched, which actually, did you get the hits today? It looks like we've got like organic hits for some reason.
Nice.
Yeah.
I did see the plausible thing pop up, but I didn't look into the email.
There's like eight unique visitors for some reason. So maybe
How about that?
Yeah, it's cool. But yeah, so we've got our website up and running. We've got a hash rate page, which I'm super excited about. So basically, this lets you calculate what your hash rate will be, and what the total network hash is for the network. Our news, which this will go up on, and shop, which we're still working on the prices for that. I think that's something we're going to have to update manually sort of as we go.
Those prices are definitely wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, hard to resent. I was just looking on Compass today, like, yeah, it's quite a loss if I go to sell it. Oh, and there's no way for me to get it shipped to Australia apparently. So I asked again, and I was like, oh, I can get cheaper power in Australia. Or they said, no, there's no way, at least for a year. So I'm locked in for a year with them to do that. So
wait, because of their terms or because
yeah.
Right, okay. That's a shame. I thought that was one of the selling points of that model, was the fact that if you ever were fed up with the hosting provider, that you could just have it shipped to your house and do it yourself.
That's what I thought too, but no.
Yes, that's another problem we're gonna have to solve.
Well, yeah, and I think it's all good learning, actually mining with them, just to see sort of what are the pitfalls, and even the support. So the support's been sort of on and off. Obviously miners going down and that sort of thing, but the other big thing was the credits that I get for the miner being down. They do on a yearly basis. So I basically have to wait till the end of the year, or I guess till the end of the cycle that I've sort of started from, to get the credits back. So that's a bit annoying as well. But
and then they're just credits that you could use to pay them back, I guess, right? Like, yes. It wouldn't be It's not going to be cash in hand. So
No. It's just credits on the
when you're
network.
thinking about leaving, right? So if you wanted to leave right now, would you have to forego all those credits that you might have accrued over the first few months, 5-6 months?
I think so, and I'd
That's really
also
shit. That's a terrible. I
it's
don't like
bad,
that.
and I'd have to sell my miner at a loss as well.
Yeah, that's I don't like that. That's definitely
I'm
not
like,
what I was like. What I'd like to do. I'd like to give credit almost, monthly at least on a monthly basis, so that users can use it the following month and reduce their cost base the next month. Not wait a year and then maybe not even get it. Like, God knows how they're going to actually report the downtime as well. Like,
well, no, they haven't. So basically, I have to. So I'm looking on Slushpool and just checking daily to see like when it's gone down, and it's up to me to notify them. So I don't get a notification of when it's down, sort of thing, which is
yeah, but like when they give you downtime credits after the year, where are they going to get that information from? Where
oh
are they
yeah,
going to say,
exactly, yeah.
like, okay, your miner was down 45 times. Here's your downtime credits, and here's the proof that we have.
Yeah.
I mean, anyways, I have no idea, but that sounds like a mess. And I'm sorry it's like that. And hopefully we can, and others as well, can help solve some of the problems with hosted miners in the marketplace at the moment, because it's a great model. It just needs to be refined and fixed a little bit.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think they're bad guys. I think it's just taken off too quickly for them to support stuff, and they've expanded like all over the place. They got locations like everywhere, right? So mine's in Oklahoma, but that's the other thing. Like, how do I even know it's in Oklahoma? There's no way for me to track that, and there's no. I was meant to be able to get some sort of camera to actually look at it, but I haven't done anything. But anyway, not to bitch about Compass, but I think for the shop specifically, we've definitely just looking at what the prices are like now. They've all come right down, so I think we need to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a volatile pricing with miners, especially given everything that's gone over after the last 2 or 3 weeks. It really sort of capitulated. But even on a daily basis, we're going to have to probably be updating our prices pretty much daily, because that's how it is in the marketplace and the suppliers that we have on hand. That's what it's like. So those are just numbers that we threw in there for the sake of getting the product live. They're obviously not indicative.
Well, I think they were accurate at the time.
No, but yeah, on that one day they were accurate, and then they've been sliding ever since. So
well, it's because they're priced in Bitcoin essentially, right? So this is like a free market, like the truest free market of any product priced in BTC. So that's why it fluctuates so much. But it's
versus the generation of Bitcoin it can create, right? Like that's your that's your base layer, and then obviously the other variable is electricity costs, because that brings down your cost basis depending on what you can get. But it's an interesting, learning a lot about Bitcoin mining and electricity in the grid, and I find it all very fascinating, and hopefully we can provide a cool experience and a nice service for people here in Australia. I mean, anywhere in the world, I guess, but obviously our focus is on Australia, and helping any Bitcoiners out there that maybe want to get into mining, don't know where to start, or don't have the space or the technical know-how, or any of the reasons why Bitcoin mining is now beyond the reach of most individuals. Not all, but most. Hopefully Alpha can help fill that void that you might have. But yeah, I mean, it's been a fun journey, and it's probably going to be a crazy ride. But
awesome.
I'm really looking forward to it. I'm happy to be building stuff that I want to use. I mean, that's always my template with startups, is just build shit that I would be a customer of, not just build shit for the sake of building shit and making money, because that's not that interesting to me. If we make a few bucks from this, fantastic. But if we can mine Bitcoin and help other people mine Bitcoin, that's where it's at. That's what's more rewarding for me.
Oh yeah, Bitcoin mining made cool. Very cool.
Yeah, and I mean, that one came to me, and I think I still like it. I mean, it's obviously got.
I still like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's got a couple of meanings. Like, it's cool because it's cool, The fact that we're offering a immersion mining solution, obviously that's also cool, but it's better at being cool as well, compared to say
Physically cool.
Yeah. Compared to say like, air cooled mining.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a bit of a play on words there, and we're
I love it. It's perfect.
trying to make it fun. It doesn't need to be also technical and nerdy all the time.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, exactly. Awesome. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Thanks, heaps, Chris. It was a cool sesh. I think we got through a lot. Like, there's a fair bit of stuff in the news that we didn't touch base on, but we can do that next week.
Yeah, we'll get back onto the weekly grind of this, so we can not build up such a backlog. But yeah, we chatted for 2.5 hours tonight. We could chat about Bitcoin for weeks. But yeah, thanks, Kieran. It's been fun, and we'll chat again soon.
Thanks, buddy. Loving the sign, and I need to get one behind me as well.
Yours is just sitting on my kitchen table, so I got to work out
how is it powered?
By a power cord.
Power cord. Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's just got like it's got the AU plug, little power adapter box thing, and then it's just got like a little thin sort of copper wire thing that's quite long. So like you don't have to have this big black adapter box hanging down the side of the wall.
Cool.
It's got like this is backwards, but it's just got like a really thin sort of thing that you can't even see it. That's how thin it is. So like,
nice.
Yeah, I'm just seeing that on top of the little
doorway
skirt. Yeah, the doorway skirting. For now, I don't know. I'm thinking about maybe moving it to like here or where my head is.
I might move that Ethereum miner and put it there, I think. The one that's not doing anything.
I'm seeing a lot of people selling their Ethereum mining rigs as well, on a couple of like mining groups. And yeah, people are just, obviously the merge is coming and the market is tanking. So all of those things are creating a big storm for people. It's probably happening in the Bitcoin mining space as well. And we're going to see it soon. I'm sure that like, we can't just keep setting new asks while the price is dropping 80%. Like at some point, miners are going to have to shut off because most people are mining at a loss at the moment, I would say, unless they're on like massive scale, which very few are. So yeah, altruistically, people are holding on, but I don't know for how much longer they can. If they've got long time preferences, then this is probably a small blip in the profits for what's to come in the years ahead. So those people probably don't care. I'd be in that boat.
Well, that's it. And it's a cheap entry point to get into the actual hardware. So it's a trade-off for that, right? So when you're at all-time highs, the hardware is like crazy expensive. Now it's come down. You can get in as long as you can maintain for the 2 years or just over 2 years, whatever it is, to the halving. You'll be sweet. You'll be sitting pretty, but it's just getting them
spot on.
Anyways, all right, I'll let you go, man.
No worries.
Next week.
Thanks, mate. Always good.
Adios.